The smell of roasted coffee drifted lazily through the quiet kitchen, mingling with the crisp morning air sneaking in from a half-open window. Ethan Hayes leaned against the marble countertop, sipping from a dark ceramic mug, his eyes scanning a glowing tablet in his hand. The suburban sun spilled gently into the room, casting long shadows over the polished floors of their modest home nestled at the edge of Maple Ridge, a community so tranquil it almost felt unreal. Upstairs, Lyra hummed softly as she tied her hair into a loose bun. She moved with the ease of routine, the rhythm of someone who had played her role for years. Her reflection blinked back at her from the mirror, same pale blue skin she carefully concealed with a dermal cloak before stepping out each day, same deep, ocean-gray eyes that saw more than they let on. To their neighbors, they were a picture of quiet domestic success. Ethan, the cybersecurity analyst contracted by the Department of Interplanetary Defense, and Lyra, the charming biotechnologist consulting on climate resilience and gene repair. A power couple in every sense. Smart, reserved, courteous. Normal. But normal was the biggest lie of all. Ethan set down his mug and gave the kitchen one last glance before heading to the garage, his fingers brushing lightly over the back of a photo frame on the wall. He stepped into his car, an unassuming electric sedan, and within seconds, the windshield lit up with encrypted overlays. A retinal scan confirmed his identity. Beneath Maple Ridge's clean streets and meticulously trimmed lawns, surveillance systems, fallback protocols, and auto-scrub algorithms buried secrets deeper than concrete foundations. Agent H-17 online, Ethan said calmly. A voice responded, filtered through a soft metallic tone. Welcome back, operative. You have 2 updates pending. Elsewhere, on the 14th floor of the BioNexus Tower, Lyra walked calmly through the sterile halls of the laboratory. Her badge identified her as Dr. Lyra Vale, a lead researcher in symbiotic genetic enhancements. Her real name, one she hadn't spoken in years, would trigger an alert in every Terran defense system. Behind the security of her lab, she entered a secure sub-level hidden in the facility's architectural blueprints. Lights dimmed. A smooth panel slid away, revealing a translucent sphere. She stepped forward. Unit Z4, re-engaged. Her voice had changed, colder, sharper. A series of light pulses scanned her. The sphere came alive, displaying a map of Earth with zones marked in crimson. Mission pending. Await new directive. Back in Maple Ridge, Ethan sat at his workstation, a multi-layered interface blinking with streams of interstellar data. An emergency simulation played on the left panel, an orbital skirmish between Earth's sentry drones and unidentified craft. He paused it, frowning. The truth was never what the public knew. While politicians made speeches about diplomacy and intergalactic peace treaties, Ethan had seen enough redacted files to know Zireya was no mere neighbor in the stars, it was a threat. Silent. Calculated. Alien. And yet, he found himself wondering about Lyra sometimes. About the way her eyes lingered too long on certain news feeds. About how she'd sometimes pause at night, her fingers drifting unconsciously to the necklace she always wore, one with markings he'd never seen in any Earth culture. They never spoke of their pasts in depth. That was the rule. For both of them. At dinner, they laughed. She poured wine. He complimented the new dish she had learned. From across the table, their eyes met, warmth, routine, a silent agreement to never go too deep. But the silence between the words was becoming heavier. That night, long after Lyra had gone to bed, Ethan returned to his terminal. A high-level clearance alert pulsed in red. Target confirmed. Priority Level 1. Location, Maple Ridge Sector. Subject, codename Zireya. He stared. The file was sparse. No image. No name. But the coordinates, they were too close. Too precise. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened the mission details. The objective: eliminate the operative before intel extraction occurs. Zero collateral. At the same moment, miles away, deep beneath the laboratory, Lyra stood frozen in front of her mission directive. Target confirmed. High-value asset in Earth Defense Circle. Codename, AEGISH. Eliminate before contact with Central Core. No hesitation. Her hands clenched. The name AEGISH meant nothing to the average Zireyan operative. But to her, it was a whisper she'd heard before, back when she still believed in the cause. The same whisper she had overheard one night when Ethan, half asleep, had murmured something in his dream. Something about a system breach. About Project Aegis. She hadn't understood it then. But now. They lay together in bed that night, backs turned, both staring into the dark. Neither of them spoke. Neither dared to. Outside, the stars were bright and cold. Inside, two assassins listened to the silence between their breaths. And the war between Earth and Zireya crept one heartbeat closer. It started with glances that lingered too long and silences that stretched a little too wide. There had always been an unspoken boundary between them, a curtain neither dared to pull back, but lately, it felt as though they were both standing at the edge, hands reaching for the fabric. Ethan noticed it first on a Tuesday morning. Lyra was in the kitchen earlier than usual, her expression neutral as she stirred coffee, but her eyes kept flicking toward his day top hat on the counter. When he stepped out to take a call, he returned a moment later to find the day top hat exactly where he left it, but the screen brightness had been adjusted, just slightly. Not enough for the untrained eye, but Ethan was trained to notice everything. He said nothing. That night, after Lyra had gone to sleep, he retrieved a small, thumb-sized device from the false bottom of his drawer, a micro-surveillance node, untraceable, silent. He embedded it in the living room's corner wall panel, its field of detection covering both her workspace and the main hallway. Just in case. For now. Lyra, for her part, had begun to count his steps. His routines, once rigid and predictable, had subtly shifted. He took longer showers. He lingered in the garage. He responded more slowly when she asked about his day. The Ethan she knew, or thought she knew, was methodical. This version? Calculating. She began to intercept the background signal of his personal device while pretending to sync the home AI. One night, while pretending to read, she watched his encrypted comms flicker briefly through a decryption relay, too fast to analyze fully, but enough to confirm a pattern. He was sending outbound messages at intervals that didn't match any normal work schedule. She installed a tracer. Non-invasive, passive. Enough to observe without alerting him. Yet it made her pulse quicken as though she'd committed a betrayal. They still laughed over dinner. He still touched her back lightly as she passed. She still leaned her head on his shoulder during late-night movies. But behind the glass of every moment was a reflection of doubt. They were both watching ghosts of who they once thought the other was. Ethan began compiling a profile. He listed habits, routines, biometric fluctuations. He logged moments when her smile came too late, when her laughter didn't reach her eyes. Every detail went into a secure folder marked with a label he couldn't bring himself to name. It was easier to pretend the target was someone else. He didn't sleep much anymore. Lyra ran simulations. She constructed holographic models of Ethan's movements, noted access points, blind spots in the home's surveillance network. She told herself it was protocol, nothing personal. The mission required precision. But when she walked past him in the hallway, her fingers brushed his. And in that brief contact, she felt warmth. Real. Alive. What was worse, the betrayal she prepared for, or the part of her that hoped he wasn't the enemy. One evening, she sat on the rooftop, legs dangling off the edge, staring into the fading dusk. Ethan joined her, wordlessly handing her a cup of tea. They sat side by side, not speaking, watching the sky shift into deep navy. "You ever think about, before?" he asked. She turned slightly. "Before what?" "Before this life. Before everything got complicated." A long pause. Then she said, "I try not to." He nodded. They didn't speak of it again. But later that night, while Ethan slept, Lyra accessed his secure storage module, the one buried 3 layers deep beneath his primary system. She'd bypassed Earth encryption before. But this was personal. She found the file. Or rather, the label of it, unknown operative, target designation, Zireya. Her blood ran cold. That name. That code. It was used only for deep cover Zireyan agents. The kind Earth intelligence didn't just monitor, they terminated. She shut the system down before viewing the details. Heart pounding, she stepped back into the dark hallway, where the smiling photographs of their past selves stared back at her from polished wooden frames. Meanwhile, Ethan ran a diagnostic on the tracer he'd discovered embedded in his data pad. It had Zireyan architecture, no doubt. The signature was faint, cleverly cloaked, but he knew it for what it was, a passive probe. He didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, he requested a restricted archive from command, citing threat level Theta. The response came in under 2 minutes. Encrypted, verified. When he opened the file, his breath stopped. Target, L-Vale. Codename, Zireya. Class 7 Deep Infiltration Asset. Lyra. He sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, willing it to change. Hoping there was a mistake. But the match was absolute, biometric, neural, voice ID. All of it. It was her. He looked up, half expecting her to be standing there. She wasn't. He closed the file and set his terminal to sleep. In her lab, Lyra stood before a full-body diagnostic scanner, running her own system integrity check. Everything normal. But she didn't feel normal. She felt like the floor beneath her had cracked and she was waiting for it to give way. She retrieved the orders from Zireya Command. They had arrived an hour ago. Termination confirmed. AEGISH is active. Execute immediately. No deviation. She didn't cry. Zireyan operatives were trained not to. But her throat tightened, and her hands clenched at her sides. How could this be Ethan? He was kind. Gentle. Flawed. But human. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't. She shut the console. At home, they passed each other like ghosts, each knowing too much and saying too little. The air between them felt thick, saturated with everything unspoken. One night, as they lay in bed, Ethan whispered, "Do you ever wonder if we were meant to find each other?" She turned her head slightly. Or meant to destroy each other? Neither said more. And in the morning, when the mission updates came, they both stared at the same line of text. Final confirmation, target identified. They didn't speak. But now they both knew. It was each other. It was a quiet evening. The kind of quiet that felt too perfect, too smooth like a glass surface moments before it shattered. The neighborhood outside lay wrapped in night, windows glowing with warm light, distant laughter echoing from a backyard gathering down the street. Inside the house, Ethan sat in the garage with the lights off, staring at a small cube in his hand. It pulsed faintly, a dull red, calibrated to activate under biometric trigger. He tucked it into a vent panel, sealing the trap with practiced precision. No alarms. No signs. Just a silent promise waiting to be broken. He didn't know if she would come down here tonight. But something in his gut told him to be ready. Upstairs, Lyra watched her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The dermal cloak flickered briefly, revealing the shimmer of blue beneath. Her face held no expression as she touched her necklace, a small, seemingly harmless charm that doubled as a field disruptor. She had used it before. She could use it again. A message had arrived earlier that day. One word, execute. They hadn't spoken much since morning. There were moments, quiet glances, short exchanges, but none that reached the heart. Not anymore. At exactly 11:03 p.m., Lyra stepped out of their bedroom. She moved silently, barefoot, clad in the soft black of their shared sleepwear, her steps silent against the wood floor. Down the stairs. Past the hallway. The garage door was slightly ajar. She pushed it open. Ethan was gone. But she felt it, the shift in pressure, the static in the air. Her eyes scanned quickly. No lights, no motion. Then a soft click. She dove left. The cube exploded behind her, not with fire, but a burst of soundless electromagnetic pulse. Her neural implants sparked. She gritted her teeth and rolled behind the workbench, pulling out the blade tucked beneath her waistband. From the shadows, Ethan moved. His eyes locked on the disturbance. He couldn't see who it was, not clearly, but the silhouette was fast, trained. Not a random intruder. Someone who knew the layout. He activated the second node. Lyra's vision blurred for half a second as the lights burst into strobing red and white. Her disruptor flared instinctively, shielding her from the worst of it. She used the moment to leap over the bench, hurling a wrench toward the sound of movement. It missed Ethan by inches. He fired his taser. The prong sliced the air. Lyra twisted mid-air, hitting the ground in a roll. She swept a leg toward his position. Contact. Ethan staggered back, hitting the shelving unit. Tools clattered. He drew his shock baton, but Lyra had vanished into the shadows. They moved like phantoms. No names. No voices. Just calculated strikes, blocked attacks, feints, and counters. For anyone watching, it would be a blur of black and red. Ethan lunged. His baton connected with her shoulder. A spark. She recoiled but didn't cry out. She struck back with a blade swipe, grazing his side. The fabric tore. Blood. They froze. He stepped back, breathing heavily, pain blooming across his ribs. She stood 3 feet away, chest rising and falling, her face barely visible under the flickering garage light. Her left hand trembled, not with fear, but restraint. They stared at each other through the veil of darkness. Then, as if by silent agreement, they broke away. Lyra retreated through the back door, vanishing into the night. Ethan remained in the garage, bleeding, staring at the door she disappeared through. Neither had seen each other's face clearly. But something felt familiar. The next morning, the silence returned. Ethan bound his side with gauze under his shirt. Lyra wore long sleeves, hiding the bruise on her arm. They shared breakfast without a word. He watched her stir coffee, her fingers slightly stiff. She watched him favor his left side as he reached for the toaster. They both noticed. Neither acknowledged it. The facade held for now. That afternoon, Ethan accessed archived mission logs from a decade-old Earth-Zireya skirmish. There was one name that came up repeatedly, Zireya. No image. Just a description. High-level field operative. Specialist in disguise. Capable of long-term infiltration. Status, unknown. He scanned the record again. Neural signature fragment. It was partial, corrupted, but it matched something he had unknowingly scanned months ago in a casual biometrics sync at home. His hand clenched around the tablet. Lyra stood in her lab, her own interface displaying simulations. But her eyes were unfocused. Her mind wandered to the night before. The way the attacker moved. The hesitation. The lack of lethal follow-up. No ordinary assassin pulled punches. Unless she ran a cross-check. Pulled motion data from the garage's shadow memory cache. Compiled it into a holographic model. She slowed it down. Frame by frame. His stance. His speed. The arc of his shoulder. Her breath caught. It was Ethan. Back at home, Ethan walked into their shared office. He looked around. There were things subtle, buried that now stood out. Books on anatomy and earth physiology besides Zireyan metabolic studies. A scarf folded too neatly, hiding tech threads. A tablet once marked as non-functional now showing signs of recent use. He opened a hidden drawer. Her drawer. Inside, a crystalline shard. Zireyan. Biometric locked. He didn't touch it. Just stared. Later that evening, Lyra stood at the edge of the lake near their neighborhood. She held the necklace in her palm. With a press, it dissolved the dermal disguise across her hand. The blue skin shimmered under moonlight. She remembered. The war. The missions. The day they selected her. She had been born for this. A soldier. A ghost. A blade hidden in plain sight. The pain of the surgeries. The implants. The training to speak Terran dialects without accent. To mimic human behaviors. To blend so well even she forgot, sometimes. Until Ethan. He had been a mission. Then a man. Then, something more. Now, he was the one thing she had been trained to destroy. But last night she hadn't. She could have. She didn't. At home, Ethan stared at the hologram spinning in the air before him. It showed two identities, Ethan Hayes. Lyra Vale. Overlaid were their real names, affiliations, and the blinking line of intersecting paths. One was Earth. One was Zireya. He looked at the image of her projected from the corrupted neural fragment. It was her. The eyes. The jawline. But beneath it, the faint shimmer of a different face. A warrior. A killer. But he didn't see an enemy. He saw the woman who made tea on rainy days. The one who knew his favorite books. The one who smiled, just slightly, when he made dumb jokes. He closed the hologram. That night, as Lyra slipped into bed beside him, she said nothing. Neither did he. But both of them lay awake, facing opposite directions. Eyes open. Hearts burning. Rain had begun to fall by the time Lyra reached the overpass. The city skyline shimmered under the downpour, neon signs bending and fracturing through sheets of water. Her boots splashed over puddles as she ran, breath tight in her chest, her cloak half torn and revealing patches of skin that flickered between human and something else, something blue, something wrong. She hadn't meant to be seen. But the Aegis operative had been quicker than she expected, and the skirmish in the alley had drawn attention. Too many lights. Too many eyes. And in a moment her disruptor faltered just for a second, her cover slipped. A flash of blue skin. It was enough. She had fled. Now, her body ached and her mind spun. Her neural implants struggled to stabilize, misfiring under stress. She clutched the side of her ribs, where the Aegis operative had landed a brutal blow. It didn't matter. She had to keep moving. The city was no longer safe. She ducked into a maintenance tunnel near the edge of the old Magrail line, where shadows grew thick and machines had long since gone silent. And then she heard him. Footsteps. Measured. Calm. Familiar. Ethan. She didn't want to believe it, but she had already known. He stepped from the shadows with his weapon raised. His eyes found hers instantly, not the human eyes that had once looked at her with warmth, but a hunter's gaze. Cold. Sharp. She straightened, wiping the blood from her mouth. So it's true, then, she said softly. You're Aegis. I should ask you the same, Ethan replied, his voice steady. Zireya. That's your name, isn't it? She didn't answer. His jaw tightened. Rain poured down from the broken slats of the tunnel roof, casting glints of light across his shock rifle. I saw the footage. I saw what you are. Lyra took a step back. Not out of fear. Out of heartbreak. You weren't supposed to find out like this, she murmured. How was I supposed to find out? When your blade was in my back. Or after the mission was done. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating them both for a heartbeat. She could see the blood on his jacket, her doing, from the garage fight. His hands trembled just slightly, despite the rain. He was angry. Hurt. And yet he hadn't pulled the trigger. She clenched her fists. I never wanted this. Then why lie? Why live beside me like none of it mattered? Because it didn't. Not at first. And then it did. You did. He raised the rifle higher. Ethan, please. You made a fool out of me. You broke into my life, my home, he cut himself off. She stepped forward. I was under orders. I didn't choose you. But I stayed. Doesn't that mean anything? He lowered the weapon, just slightly. You're a threat to everything I protect. Everything I believe in. And yet you haven't shot. Their eyes locked. The rain continued to fall, now joined by the low rumble of a nearby mag train passing far above. Lyra took another step closer, rain soaking her hair, her voice barely a whisper. I was given the directive. Kill Ethan Hayes. Terminate Aegis H. His breath caught. But I didn't, she said. I couldn't. Why? Because somewhere between the mission and the lies, I fell in love with you. He stared at her for a long moment. And then, with a growl of frustration, he threw the rifle down. It clattered against the tunnel floor. You think that makes this easier? No, she said. But it makes it real. Ethan stepped forward now, chest heaving, anger radiating off him like heat. You were going to kill me? You were going to kill me, too. We were never meant to survive this. Then why are we still standing here? Neither of them had an answer. In the silence that followed, their eyes traced every scar, every wound, every memory they tried to forget. All the breakfasts, the walks, the shared books and quiet smiles. None of it felt fake. All of it felt like betrayal. "I should arrest you," Ethan said. "You should," she agreed. "I should hand you over, expose your whole network." "Do it." He stepped closer. They were a breath apart now, both soaking, both shaking. The tension between them was a taut wire, threatening to snap. He reached for her arm. She didn't flinch. But then he let go. "I can't," he whispered. Tears mixed with rain on her face. She turned away. "Then we're both compromised," she said. He nodded slowly. "Yeah. We are." Neither of them moved. Finally, Lyra took a step back. Then another. Ethan didn't follow. She looked over her shoulder. Her face was unreadable. "Goodbye, Ethan." He said nothing. She disappeared into the darkness. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt truly alone. He retrieved his rifle, staring at the place she had just stood. He could still feel her warmth, the echo of her voice, the weight of what she had done. He could have stopped her. He hadn't. In the end, both had made their choice. Not to kill. But not to stay, either. The debriefings were cold. Ethan sat in a chair bolted to the floor, surrounded by three shadowed figures behind a pane of polarized glass. Their voices came through a narrow speaker, filtered and flat. No names, no faces. Just questions. "Why did you let her go? Do you understand what you've done? Are you compromised?" He answered each one with calculated precision, voice steady but dead inside. His eyes stared forward, unfocused, replaying every second of that night in the tunnel. Lyra's face. Her voice. Her hands shaking. The rain. "She had the chance to kill me," he said. "She didn't." The response was silence. Then a cold directive: "Observe. Report. Finish what you started." When he was released, they took his access clearance down 2 levels. They told him it was procedural. Temporary. But he knew better. He wasn't trusted anymore. On the other side of the stars, deep within the glass and steel underbelly of Zireya's covered city, Lyra stood in a sterile room surrounded by superiors cloaked in the shifting shimmer of holographic distortion. Shadow Viral agents didn't show their faces. That was Rule 1. The questions came rapid fire, in Zireyan tongue. "You failed to terminate the target. Was the Earth operative aware of your identity prior to exposure? Did you engage in emotional compromise?" Lyra answered without hesitation. She lied where she had to, sidestepped where she could. But they knew. They always knew. "He let me go," she said at last. The silence that followed was heavy with judgment. Her punishment was subtle: demotion from active infiltration status, reassignment to intelligence curation. Less field work. More shadows. They called it preservation. But it was exile. She wasn't trusted either. Weeks passed. Neither reached out. Neither spoke of the other. But the wound remained, deep, raw, invisible. Ethan buried himself in low-level surveillance audits, watching corrupted feeds of border zones and tracking unauthorized ship signatures. That was when he saw it, a looped signal pattern echoing across comms from both sides. The frequency was masked, altered just enough to pass as noise. But the signature was the same. And it wasn't Earth. It wasn't Zireya. He archived it. labeled it anomalous, then started digging. Meanwhile, Lyra noticed discrepancies in the war records she was assigned to clean. Entire years wiped clean of engagement logs. Casualty lists with duplicate names. Conflicting data on orbital skirmishes she remembered being real. Official history rewritten with careful precision. Something was wrong. She sent a trace request into the classified archive, a protocol buried 6 layers beneath her clearance. It was denied. Then flagged. Within hours, she received a personal warning from a masked handler: "Stop. Do not pursue this path." She didn't stop. And neither did Ethan. They worked in silence, each unaware of the other's path, yet slowly spiraling toward the same point. The deeper they went, the more patterns emerged. Weapons used in Zireyan raids traced back to Terran prototypes that had never left test phase. Earth ships attacked by formations flying in Zireya's signature patterns, but with no recorded launches. Proxy attacks. False flags. Ethan's breaking point came when he found evidence of Project Catalyst, an experimental psyop designed to seed hostility between emerging galactic civilizations by fabricating first strike incidents. The documents were fragmented, corrupted, but enough remained to show it wasn't just theory. It was active. He stared at the file for hours, bile rising in his throat. All the lives. All the blood. A war built not on fear, not even on misunderstanding, but manipulation. He didn't report the discovery. Instead, he encrypted the data, created a ghost drive, and hid it beneath layers of misdirection in the deep web of the interstellar network. Lyra's own discovery mirrored his. She traced the pattern of disappearances from both Earth and Zireya. Scientists, diplomats, cultural liaisons, all quietly removed, reassigned, or declared missing in disputed zones. People who advocated for unity, for peace, erased. She confronted one of her old mentors, a code analyst who had taught her how to read lies buried in code. He didn't deny it. "There are those who profit from war," he said. "On both sides. And others who feed them." "Who?" she whispered. He didn't answer. The next day, he was gone. She sat alone in her quarters that night, staring at a blank screen, her hands trembling. She wanted to scream. To cry. But Zireyan operatives didn't show emotion. Except she wasn't just an operative anymore. Somewhere inside her, Lyra, not Zireya, still lived. That was when she cracked the firewall. A sequence of communications logged between a third-party relay node orbiting neither Earth nor Zireya, but a barren moon long thought abandoned. The messages were fragmented but consistent. She decoded one. Next phase, sustain escalations. Maintain mutual distrust. Target peacekeepers. Her heart sank. She needed to tell someone. But who could she trust? And then she remembered his voice. Ethan. He had let her go. Even after everything. He had chosen not to kill. That had to mean something. Far across space, Ethan sat in a closed-off data room, surrounded by screens. He was tracing a shipment route disguised as humanitarian aid that matched black market energy signatures linked to several unsanctioned attacks. The loop ended near a derelict moon base. Same moon. Same trail. He stared at the screen. Then pulled up a file he hadn't opened in weeks. Lyra Vale, alias, Zireya. He hesitated. Then encrypted a message. Coordinates. A date. A time. No subject line. No name. He sent it. And waited. On the other side of the void, Lyra received a signal. She stared at the screen for a long time, then began to pack. Neither of them knew what they would say. But somehow, despite the betrayal, the war, the lies, there was still something stronger. Something worth risking everything for. Not peace. Not even truth. But the chance to believe again. The meeting point was an abandoned mining rig buried deep beneath the crust of the moon Helix 3 in neutral zone, once used by rogue traders, now left to rot in silence. Ethan arrived first, cloaked in shadows, every muscle tense. He checked the time. She was late. Or maybe she wasn't coming. He turned to leave when a door hissed open behind him. Boots echoed softly on the metal floor. He didn't turn. "You came," he said quietly. Lyra stepped into the dim light, her face half concealed beneath the hood. The air between them vibrated with tension. "I had to know if you were real. If the message wasn't a trap." Ethan lowered his hood. "Still might be. For both of us," she said, folding her arms. They stood in silence for a moment. Then she added, "You look worse than I remember." "So do you." A faint smile ghosted her lips. It was gone before it could mean anything. Ethan opened the encrypted tablet he'd brought. The hologram flickered to life, displaying fragments of communications between anonymous corporate networks. Lyra produced a matching drive from beneath her cloak. "I followed the same trail. Different data, same pattern." They synced their drives, the displays merging into a single interface. Names began to appear. Dates. Locations. Hidden behind layers of encryption were shipping manifests, forged diplomatic incidents, falsified attack reports. At the center of it all, a single emblem. A silver triangle nested within a crimson circle. Lyra leaned in. "Nemex Consortium." Ethan nodded. "A multi-system syndicate. They fund both Aegis and Shadowverl. War is just business. And we're pawns," she said bitterly. "Not anymore." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "They'll come for us. Both sides. And Nemex, once they realize we've found this. Then we hit first." Their plan was reckless. The relay station between Earth and Zireya was the most secure node in the quadrant. Built into the orbiting remains of a decommissioned dreadnought, it floated like a silent predator in deep space. They breached it using stolen access codes, disguised under a diplomatic override. For exactly 90 seconds, they were invisible. Ethan cut through the maintenance locks. Lyra bypassed the internal sensors with Zireyan subroutines. Inside, the relay was a cold web of data streams. Every signal between the two worlds passed through this nexus. Every lie. Every order. They moved quickly. Ethan uploaded a virus to stall outgoing transmissions. Lyra scanned for the central core where physical backups were kept in magnetic vaults. She found it. They forced the vault open with a pulse disruptor. Inside were rows of crystalline drives. Lyra pulled one. Inserted it into her scanner. Her breath caught. Ethan looked over her shoulder. The screen displayed a visual log, a boardroom meeting. 11 figures, faces hidden, voices distorted. A presentation was underway. Projected behind them was a galactic map. Routes highlighted in red and green. A speaker began, "By Q4, we expect an 11% increase in defense contracts. The Zireya Earth escalation has yielded higher margins than the Vorn conflict." Lyra froze. "They are treating it like a quarterly report," she said, voice hollow. Ethan clenched his fists. "We have to broadcast this. Leak it. Blow it wide open." She looked at him. They'll kill us before we hit send. As if on cue, alarms blared. They're here, Ethan said, already reaching for his weapon. A blast rocked the corridor outside. Lights flickered. A voice crackled through the station's intercom. To the infiltrators, surrender and you may be spared. Lyra snorted. Always so generous. Ethan checked the scanner. 3 incoming life signs. Fast. Not human. Hunters, he muttered. They took position near the main relay chamber. Lyra rewired the defense grid, setting up a temporary shield. Ethan set a charge near the airlock. The first hunter burst through 8 feet tall, cybernetic limbs, armor etched with symbols neither had seen before. It moved like a blur, blades snapping from its arms. Ethan fired. The stun round staggered it but didn't drop it. Lyra lunged from the side, sliding beneath its swing and jamming an energy blade into the joint of its leg. It screamed an awful, synthetic howl. A second hunter crashed through the ceiling, claws outstretched. Ethan rolled, drawing his sidearm. 2 precise shots to the neck. Sparks flew. The thing shuddered. They are not from Earth or Zireya, he said, panting. Nemex has its own toys, Lyra replied. The third hunter advanced bulkier, with a cannon fused to one arm. It fired, and the blast caught Ethan in the side, hurling him against the wall. Lyra screamed. She threw a disc grenade, hitting the thing square in the chest. The explosion ripped it back into the corridor. She rushed to Ethan. Blood ran from his side. Still alive, he grunted. She pulled him to cover, fingers trembling. Why didn't you wear armor? Didn't want to scare you? She laughed, a breathless, pained sound. Idiot. You love it. She hesitated. Then nodded. I do. Outside, more footsteps echoed. We can't hold them, Ethan said. We don't need to. Just one broadcast. She slid the data drive into the emergency beacon. The signal would take 60 seconds to compile. They took position. The final wave came hard for hunters, moving in sync. Ethan and Lyra fought like they had trained together for years. Covering each other. Back to back. Fire and blade. Ethan dropped one with a plasma burst. Lyra eviscerated another with a spinning kick and blade thrust. The last 2 closed in. Then the beacon flashed. Upload complete, the console said. Lyra hit the send key. The drive fired its signal straight into the interstellar net. The truth was out. The hunters hesitated. Orders scrambled. Confusion. Ethan raised his weapon. Let's end this. Together, they charged. And somewhere in the void, as data flowed faster than light, 2 fugitives stood their ground against the architects of war. Not for vengeance. Not for glory. But for truth. And maybe, just maybe, for each other. The stars streaked past like silver fire as their stolen cruiser tore through sublight space, engines overclocked and burning red. Ethan sat at the helm, sweat streaking down his temple as he diverted emergency power to the shields. They're gaining, he muttered. Lyra crouched beside the weapon station, checking the targeting systems. Her fingers flew across the console, voice tight. 3 ships. All tagged. Nemex hunters. Figures they'd send their best. They know what we stole. The cruiser jolted violently as the first plasma bolt struck the aft stabilizers. Warning lights flared. Ethan Lyra started. I know. Hold on. He banked hard, veering between asteroid fragments in a debris field near the Archon Belt. Behind them, the hunter ships maneuvered with impossible precision, trailing green ion tails and weapons primed. Lyra launched countermeasures. Micromines detonated, disrupting 2 of the ships. One broke off, spinning out. The other 2 kept coming. "How far are we from the Nemex core hub?" she asked. 4 minutes. If we make it. They both knew this wasn't a battle they could win with weapons alone. The Nemex Consortium's central hub floated above the neutral moon of Kaldar 9. From orbit, it resembled a massive, layered disk, its lower levels concealed in a permanent storm, upper tiers cloaked in stealth arrays and defense grids. It was corporate territory, off limits to military personnel from any system. But not to ghosts. Ethan and Lyra had become exactly that. They breached the perimeter by plunging their cruiser through the underbelly storm, a suicide maneuver that masked their energy signatures just long enough to reach the docking trench. The ship slammed into the docking bay with a screech of tortured metal. Systems failed. Power dropped. Ethan coughed, blinking blood from his eyes. Lyra was already moving. "Come on. We've got one shot." They abandoned the ship and sprinted into the station's lower corridors, alarms blaring as automated security swarmed. Red lights flashed across metallic walls. Drones descended like insects. Lyra dropped 2 with clean shots from her plasma pistol. Ethan covered her with a pulse repeater, laying suppressing fire as they charged toward the central data tower. Each level brought heavier resistance. Nemex agents in reinforced armor emerged, blocking halls with energy shields. Ethan lobbed a shock grenade, shattering the line. Lyra moved through the smoke like a phantom, blade slicing, shots striking with clinical precision. Finally, they reached the tower. A vast, open chamber with a central spire of data coils spiraling hundreds of meters into the air. Screens and feeds surrounded them, war reports, financial spikes, casualty charts. All managed, manipulated. At the top, the broadcast node. The only place from which they could reach the Galactic Alliance's public net. "Elevators locked," Ethan said, panting. Lyra pointed upward. "We climb." They scaled the internal scaffold, climbing through smoke and sparks as fire suppression systems failed. Behind them, footsteps echoed, more hunters. Faster this time. Halfway up, Ethan was hit. A round struck his side, throwing him from the ladder. He caught a rung, barely hanging on. "Ethan!" Lyra cried. "Go. You have to reach the node." "I'm not leaving you." He gritted his teeth. Blood soaked through his armor. "Lyra. This is bigger than us." She looked down, eyes burning. "You idiot," she whispered. And she climbed back down. 2 hunters reached the level. Lyra met them head on. The first lunged, she ducked, slashing its knee joint. It stumbled, and she fired point blank into its helmet. The second struck her hard across the ribs, sending her crashing into the railing. She coughed, rolled, then jammed a spike into its throat as it closed in. Sparks flew. It dropped. Ethan was barely conscious. She pulled him up, slinging his arm over her shoulder. "We do this together. Or not at all." Step by step, they climbed. Gunfire rang below. When they reached the node, Lyra slammed the drive into the interface. A holographic prompt appeared, "Authenticate." Ethan, gasping, tapped his ID code. The system stalled and unlocked. The console whirred. The signal went live. Across the galaxy, billions of screens flickered. And then played the footage, Nemec's boardrooms, war meetings, forged attack plans. The truth. Gasps. Silence. Uproar. Nemex had just lost its veil. Inside the tower, Lyra slumped beside Ethan, both of them watching the signal ripple outward. More footsteps echoed above. "They'll come," Ethan said. Lyra nodded. "Let them." But no more hunters came. Instead, a voice echoed through the chamber. Female. Cold. "You have done the impossible. But you've also signed your debts." A figure descended tall, armored in shimmering obsidian. No insignia. No emotion. Lyra stood. "You're too late." The figure aimed. Fired. Lyra stepped forward. The bolt struck her square in the chest. She dropped. Ethan roared, emptying his pistol. The figure staggered, then fell. He crawled to Lyra, pulling her close. Her eyes fluttered. "Still here," she whispered. "You're insane. You love it." He laughed, tears falling. Above them, the broadcast continued. The galaxy had changed. And in the shadow of the tower, two broken fugitives held onto the only thing that still made sense. Each other. The war didn't end with a bang, but with a broadcast. The footage Ethan and Lyra risked everything to release spread like fire across the interstellar net. Governments scrambled, corporations denied, but the damage had been done. Nemex collapsed within days, its executives arrested or disappeared. Investigations exploded across dozens of systems. The Galactic Alliance intervened, calling an emergency summit. For the first time in decades, Earth and Zireya sat at the same table not as enemies, but as parties seeking answers. A ceasefire was declared. Then a treaty. Reparations. Joint investigations. Open archives. For the first time in living memory, there was silence. Peace. Ethan woke in a medbay 3 days after the broadcast. The sterile white light made him blink. His side ached. His lungs felt like fire. But he was alive. And she was there. Lyra sat at his bedside, one arm bandaged, her skin still healing. Her eyes were tired but warm. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," he rasped back. She leaned forward. "You really don't know how to die quietly, do you?" He smiled. "Not my style." They didn't talk about the tower. Not yet. Not about the pain or the deaths. Only the silence that followed. The sense that something had shifted. When he was cleared to leave, neither Aegis nor Shadowverl sent for them. Instead, they received identical messages. Effective immediately, your contracts are terminated. You are advised to remain in neutral space. Do not attempt re-entry into former territories. They were free. And they were exiles. A month passed. They settled on a world called Thesson Primalush, ocean ring planet that had long served as a diplomatic waypoint. Neutral, quiet, and beautiful. There, on a cliff overlooking the sea, they built a home. Nothing grand. Just enough space for books, maps, weapons, and peace. The first joint Earth-Zireya embassy opened in the capital city below. Ships from both worlds landed side by side. Flags flew. Children from different species played in shared schools. It wasn't perfect. Not yet. But it was a beginning. Lyra found work as a translator and cultural analyst. Ethan started teaching starship systems at the academy. They grew tomatoes in the backyard. Sometimes, at night, they sat in silence on the porch, listening to the wind. He often wondered if they would ever stop looking over their shoulders. If peace would ever feel permanent. She often wondered if the war would ever truly leave them. But in those quiet hours, under alien stars, none of it mattered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sea gold, Lyra turned to him. "Do you regret it?" He looked up from his tablet. "Regret what? Falling for a former enemy?" Ethan paused, then set the tablet down. He looked at her, at the lines around her eyes that hadn't been there a year ago, at the faint shimmer of blue under her skin, no longer hidden. "No," he said. "I only regret not knowing sooner. So I could have had more time to love you." She blinked. Smiled. The wind picked up. He reached for her hand. The stars above no longer looked like battlefields. Just constellations. A map of where they'd been. And perhaps, a promise of where they could go.